Lissa is one of my personal favorite characters in Fire Emblem Awakening, and even putting aside my personal feelings, I think she might actually be the best character in the game. That might seem like an absurd statement to some people, but if you are playing on the highest difficulty, using the most advanced strategies, and playing without any grinding or DLC, you would be quite surprised at just how essential this character is and how well she scales into the late game, unlike anyone else. Now, the term best is obviously subjective. I mean, what exactly does this even mean? We have to define this term before we can decide what the best actually is. And even then, of course, this video is only going to reflect my opinions. If you want to argue with it, there's a comment section right down there. But I do think that the majority of players who understand this game at the highest level will probably agree that you can at least make an argument for Lissa being one of the top characters in the game, if not the best overall. In order to make sense of this argument, we have to start from the beginning, build up a full understanding of why Lissa is good, what she's good at, and most importantly, I want to compare her against other characters who fill similar roles and explain why Lissa, in the end, stands above all of them. Then we're also going to talk about her builds and her potential pairings. But first of all, we have to talk about Frederick. There are a good number of people who would say that Frederick is the best character in the game, and I understand why it's easy to come to that conclusion, but I would definitely disagree with that assessment. I think he's very impactful in the early game. I think he's very nearly essential to the early game, but it's pretty much universally agreed that he does eventually fall off in terms of his combat ability, and without that, he provides significantly less to the team for the entire rest of the game, for the late game and even the mid game. So why exactly does Frederick fall off so hard, and what does this even mean? Is there any way to keep him viable? The main issue with Frederick is that his biggest weakness is his lack of speed, and speed is such an important stat in Awakening. I think it's the most important stat. You won't notice this weakness at first at the start of the game because his level is comparatively very high compared to the enemies and compared to all of your other characters. But when you think about this closely, the issue becomes more readily apparent. Frederick is essentially a level 21 character, but he has comparable speed to level 1 and level 5 characters in the first few chapters of the game. Frederick is 15 levels behind the speed curve compared to the enemies in this game. This is a problem that cannot be fixed. The further you get into the game, the closer enemies are going to be to Frederick in terms of level, and eventually, just about everything on the map is going to be outspeeding him to an absurd degree. In many situations, he requires a dedicated, speed-focused pair-up just to avoid being doubled, and he has no chance of doubling anything. By this time, Frederick can't even one-shot enemies like he used to do back in the good old days of Chapter 1 and 2, so he doesn't really function as a removal tool, but he also can't really take hits from enemies anymore either, because they're actually dealing pretty significant damage to him in return. He can't enemy phase sweep the way that he used to, and while you might be able to find a matchup here or there where he can be used to body block a single enemy, maybe two if you're lucky, that's typically it. I've played this game a lot, and no matter how I try to make Frederick work, he always eventually runs into this issue. He's 15 levels behind the speed curve. You can't fix that. Giving him a Cordelia or a Sumia support is probably the best way to make him viable, and even that is starting to feel lackluster as I've been exploring more options with other characters who are just faster. Speed is really the king here. You think switching him into a faster class would help, but that's a problem for two reasons. First, Frederick doesn't have access to any particularly fast classes to begin with, so even if you wanted to switch him into a fast class, your only options are Paladin and Griffin Rider. Paladin, by the way, has exactly average speed, and Griffin is only 1 point faster, so neither class is going to be particularly fast. Secondly, Frederick himself. Frederick isn't slow because he's a great knight. he's actually slow compared to other great knights. He has a -2 speed modifier, which is tied for the worst in the game, along with Kellum and Noe. It's actually, -2 is actually one of the worst modifiers you can have, and speed is the worst stat to be bad in. The average base speed growth is 39, Frederick has 35. No matter what class you switch him into, he's always going to be notably slower than other characters in the same class, and more importantly, slower than the most dangerous enemies. He can't regain 15 additional levels and be way ahead of the enemy level curve for the rest of the game, like he used to do at the start, so what can he actually do? When you get to this point, the only major value that Frederick still provides is serving as a strength and defense pair-up for another unit. Maybe he can hit an enemy with an effective weapon if you're very careful with positioning and strategy, and none of this is bad, but if your roster is starting to get crowded, he's often going to be a character that you're going to cut in favor of characters who are able to offer more value or keep themselves alive without being a liability. Now, let's look at Lissa by comparison. In my opinion, Frederick and Lissa are the only two characters who are nearly essential to the early game of Lunatic and especially Lunatic Plus. So comparing them, I think, is a very fair game. They provide different roles, which often leads to Lissa being underestimated, but I do think they are both very nearly equal in terms of early game value. If Lissa died, I would probably restart a run. She can provide additional healing on top of your vulnerary use in order to keep your characters on full health, and over time, she's easily going to be able to heal characters for way more than a vulnerary, sometimes back to full health with a single staff charge. Staff charges are more cost efficient than using items for healing. They are also way more efficient in terms of action economy. Crom can't use a vulnerary and then attack an enemy in the same turn. Let's say if they have Vantage Plus, he wouldn't be able to attack them without dying. But Lissa can heal him, and then he can use his action to attack the enemy. She allows your offensive characters to always keep up the momentum without wasting their actions using items to heal themselves. And meanwhile, the entire time she is doing this, she is generating free, uncontested experience. She literally trains herself just by helping the rest of your army. The value of this uncontested experience is truly immeasurable, and is probably one of the most underrated things in Lissa's kit, and about staff users in Awakening in general. You see, people who delve deep into the mechanic of Fire Emblem games have largely been conditioned by Fates, which came out later, to think that staff experience gain is very poor. But the staff formula between Awakening and Fates was actually changed. So while people have this idea in their head of staff experience being bad, because this is how it works in the game that they have mostly played, it's actually far from true in Awakening. It is quite the opposite. In Fates, the amount of experience you get is heavily controlled, and the game goes out of its way to prevent you from leveling above the experience curve by using a staff, by modifying your amount of experience gain. In Awakening, however, the formula is unrestricted. Staves give a set amount of experience, and this is always true. No matter who you use it on, or what the situation is, Lissa will always gain the same amount of experience. So even if she is 15 levels ahead of the level curve, she will continue to gain staff experience at the same rate as when she was level 1. This alone is an unbelievable asset in a game that is so focused on growths. It basically means that Lissa can always and very easily level above the curve, while combat characters have a more difficult time doing this as their experience gain starts to slow down if they get over-leveled. But what's even more crazy is that she doesn't need to steal experience from anyone else by doing this. If you want to hyper-invest into Robin by feeding them all of the kills, you're taking experience away from Frederick and Vaike. If you invest into Vaike, you're taking experience away from Robin. Lissa isn't like this. She doesn't take experience away from anyone else. She just conjures experience out of thin air and gives it to herself. If Lissa had a big weakness like Frederick, it would actually be quite reasonable for her to level up 15 levels ahead of the enemy level curve in order to fix her stat deficits. But that gets into the other point. Lissa scales so much better than Frederick. She doesn't really have a clear weakness. She's a little bit mediocre, but she doesn't have any low stats. They actually have very comparable growth rates for speed, but unlike Frederick, Lissa doesn't have that -2 speed modifier, and this means she's going to be pretty equal compared to other sages, but because of the power of staff experience, she can always easily level up ahead of the curve, and then she uses those extra levels to bolster her speed even further, so she's typically going to be ahead of enemy sages and other medium speed classes. Also, unlike Frederick, she can nuke enemies from 2 tiles away more consistently. You see, a hand axe only has 3 might, but Arc Thunder has 10 might, and if we're being generous, the short axe still only has 7 might. On top of that, Lissa is going to be selectively targeting enemies with the low resistance stat, which makes her individual attacks deal even more damage. And because she's better at keeping up with the speed curve, she's better at doubling her attacks, and she pushes this advantage even further by dealing more damage than Frederick twice. At worst, she's a much higher value for contributing big damage chip. But even then, even if her combat was the same as Frederick or even worse, that wouldn't even matter, because unlike Frederick, who provides very little value outside of his combat utility and drops off immensely once he stops being relevant in combat, Lissa's main value is her staff usage, and this value never falls off. Indeed, it actually increases over time. This means at the start of the game, both Frederick and Lissa share that quality of being nearly essential, but in the mid-game and late game, Frederick stops being useful, while Lissa becomes better and better and better. This is why I personally rank Lissa even above Frederick as the best character in the game. Frederick is like having a top-tier breakfast, and then a mediocre lunch and dinner. Lissa is like having that same top-tier breakfast, but then somehow the lunch service and the dinner menu is even better than the breakfast was. You're obviously going to rate Lissa higher if you had to compare them as 2 different restaurants, I guess. Not only does she continue to provide heal staff value, but she's eventually going to be able to use Physic to safely heal characters from a distance without messing up your positioning, and she can even use the rescue staff starting very early on in the game, which allows for tactics and strategies that are otherwise impossible. Awakening uniquely allows for an entire meta that is based around infinite usage of the rescue staff, because after chapter 12, you will be able to buy them infinitely, as many as you can afford, and a trained Lissa is not going to have very much competition when it comes to this primary staff using role. She is already going to be highly trained, thanks to the fact that she's been gaining experience since quite literally before chapter 1, and with her high magic stat, she will be able to rescue characters from easily 10 or more tiles away, and on top of that, there's not even a downside to fielding 2, 3, or even 4 staff users anyway. Not only is her combat actually going to be better than Frederick's at this point, but even if you're only using her to rescue, heal, and physic, she is contributing to your army in a way that goes far beyond the scope of what Frederick is ever capable of as a utility character. People, especially with Awakening, tend to get fixated on this idea that you need to be able to enemy face sweep in order to be a good unit. Like, that's the only good units in this game are the enemy face sweepers. And it's really led to utility characters like Lissa being massively underrated by the community and completely overlooked. I mean, honestly, even when I was picking footage to use for this video, I have to admit, it's pretty hard to find clips where Lissa specifically stands out. She's not proactive, she's not flashy, she's not killing 10 enemies in a single turn, but she's always there on the battlefield every turn, constantly providing value. The reality is that there are many characters who scale very well into the late game in Awakening, and Frederick is just not one of them. I'm not going to discount his contributions as one of the very few, very essential early game characters, but out of that pretty small group, I would say Robin is the least mandatory, Frederick has the worst scaling, and Lissa is the only one that is truly essential to me, and definitely, I would say, objectively maintains her top tier viability all the way from chapter 1 until the endgame. Oh, and by the way, if you want more specific details about how amazing the rescue staff is, I really recommend checking out my team building guide, because I talk about it in very explicit detail there. Instead of going over the same topic again in a second video, I'm just going to move on to the next point of comparison, and you can watch that one if you want more information. So anyway, you might be thinking, if this Lissa versus Frederick argument is true, then the same thing should be true for Maribelle, and even Miriel and Ricken and other staff-using characters as well. And it definitely does hold true, to varying extents on a character basis, when you compare each of those characters against Frederick. But how can we tell which of these characters are better or worse than Lissa, specifically? Well, first of all, availability is going to be a pretty big sticking point. Lissa is the only character who starts with staff access and is available in every single chapter of the game. So even if all of the other characters were equally good, which they're not, this essentially would just mean that Lissa is equally as good as all of the other staff users, but in more chapters. And crucially, in the very difficult early game chapters. Now, if you're not someone who factors availability into your rankings, that's fine, because we're still going to discuss each individual character and why Lissa is almost certainly better than all of them. Maribelle is probably the most directly comparable to Lissa, so let's start with her. She also joins relatively early on, and she can immediately begin providing staff utility, and she scales with great long-term potential as a utility and support unit. I will say that Maribelle is typically going to be a little bit weaker than Lissa in terms of combat. She is less bulky, and she is slower, which makes her lack of bulk an even bigger issue. Still, having said that, they are both great characters, and you should probably just use both of them if you have the room on your team for both Lissa and Maribelle. But Maribelle's main advantage, if we want to compare them, is that she can promote directly into Valkyrie without using a second seal. This gives a direct line to Dual Support Plus, as well as getting Demoiselle as part of her standard kit. Maribelle is a very great support and pair-up unit. One of the best. But side-by-side comparison, Lissa is almost unquestionably the better of the two units due to the fact that both of them fill a similar role, but Lissa has better HP, defense, and speed. It's just easier to keep Lissa alive, and she provides more value across a wider range of situations where you need her to fight. The next one we need to discuss is Miriel, and this is because she is the one character who makes a very solid case for being on Lissa's level, or even exceeding Lissa in terms of her long-term combat potential. Their differences in growth rates are minor, but Miriel is going to have a bit more magic and a bit more speed, and those are very important stats, and these small growth rate differences will start to add up over the course of 10, 15, or 20 levels. Miriel is going to be better at the player phase removal side of things, especially when they both initially promote into Sage, and Miriel has a higher tome rank. But the difference is that as soon as Miriel gets access to staves, she's almost equally as good as Lissa right away, with no further training needed. The heal and rescue staff both only require E-rank staff usage, so it's mostly only the physics staff that Miriel won't be able to use right away. And on the other hand, like I said, when Lissa first promotes into Sage, she's going to be stuck with E-rank and tomes. And this is still pretty good, but she's going to need a little bit of training to get her combat up to speed, so that she can get access to the even stronger tomes. Having said that, in terms of usability, there is a big problem with Miriel versus Lissa, and it comes back to what we discussed about staff experience, and specifically leeching from other characters. It is true that after Miriel promotes into Sage, she's going to get all of the same benefits of staff using classes: experience gain, utility. The difference is that when Miriel first joins and she's a mage, it's going to be harder to train her than it is to train Lissa. You need to actually find situations where she can get chip experience, where you can feed her kills, and you need to make sure that she can reach level 10 in a base combat class against Lunatic or Lunatic plus level enemies. And all of the time she's doing this, she is competing for experience with other characters. She's taking it away from other characters. Lissa, as we discussed, generates free experience by just doing her job, and she never ever needs to engage in risky combat in order to level up. Miriel, on the other hand, needs to fight extremely dangerous enemies who can often one-round or even one-shot her. All the while, the more experience you give to Miriel, the less that Robin, Vaike, and Frederick are getting. Now, this isn't the same thing as availability. This is a persistent problem that you need to think about, and you need to find a way to solve this experience routing in every chapter whenever you're planning to use Miriel. It is not an impossible puzzle to solve by any means, but in my opinion, this does give Lissa the edge over Miriel. She is a more convenient character to use, she requires less risk, it's less complicated to feed, train, and experience route for her, and more importantly, she does not steal experience from your other project units. This brings us to Ricken, who essentially has all of the downsides of Miriel, but virtually none of the upsides. He joins later, underleveled, and his one claim to fame is that he does start with D rank in tomes right away, which is actually kinda great. But given that he's one of the slower characters in the game, it will be difficult to find long-term value with him, and he never rivals Miriel or Lissa in terms of long-term viability. The best he can do is become a magic pair-up unit and staff bot, but it does require training him and promoting him into Sage to even really get that value. Again, it's not impossible, but he won't be as good as Lissa in the same role as compared to Miriel, who compares very favorably with Lissa. Now, I did save the best for last because I think the remaining two characters make very solid use cases. I don't think they are as good as Lissa, but I think they are in the top tier with her, and they can be mentioned in the same discussion. Of course, I'm talking about Libra and Anna. If you've played this game enough times, you will often find these characters on your roster whether you planned for it or not. To put it bluntly, they are both top tier utility units, and you get them fully trained for free with no investment required. There's almost no reason not to use them. They don't have the same top tier availability as Lissa because you're not going to get them at the start of the game, but they also don't require a master seal or any investment or training like Lissa does. Additionally, you don't need to worry about keeping them alive in the difficult early game battles like you do with Lissa. They join your party later on with high magic, access to the best stabs already, good staff range, and honestly, in both cases, pretty good combat. Awakening, in my opinion, might be the game that does the most incredible job of balancing out project units versus units that you get for free. I talked about this in some of my previous videos, like when I compared the return on investment you get for training Vaike versus the ease of use you get by letting Gregor join for free later on in the same role. And in many cases, there is no clear, objectively superior answer. There's often a good reason and a good argument for why you should use Vaike or you should use Gregor, and it can often depend on your team composition, the current state of your run, and just coming down to personal preference. And honestly, unlike with Gregor and Vaike, who I would never use both on the same team, I think it is completely viable to field Lissa, Anna, and Libra, all three going into the mid and even the late game chapters. There's no reason not to do it, because you're tripling your staff utility for no cost. Later on, if my roster starts to get too crowded, I tend to cut Anna first, because she has a limited list of support options, and I personally find supports to be a extremely valuable tool in this game. However, the fact that she also has Lock Touch utility means that you could reasonably send her back out onto the field at any later point in the game. She's just a character that is very difficult to ever truly bench. And if you love using her and you want to use her, you can pair her up with male Robin to get the best possible value. I still rate Anna below Lissa overall. She doesn't require a dedicated Robin support to be her best self, but Anna and Lissa are both top tier, for sure, no questions asked. After this, I think the last comparison comes down to that Lissa versus Libra, and this, in my opinion, is the closest comparison, and the one that mostly comes down to personal preference. If you don't care about availability, they're very equal. A trained Lissa is typically going to be more important to keep on the active roster than Libra, but if you have never trained any other staff users along the way, Libra, when he joins, will unquestionably be your most valuable utility staff user. The fact that he is able to fight against Lunatic plus enemies in the chapter when he joins is just icing on the cake. This guy is incredible. One of the best pre-promote units. Now, based on my personal experience, Lissa is so crucial to the early game, and she gains so much staff experience for free anyway. She is pretty much always going to be trained by the time Libra joins, whether you like it or not. And for this reason, she pretty much always ends up surpassing Libra for me, but I can see that theoretically a playthrough could exist where you could have a Libra who outshines Lissa. Now, again, I ultimately rate Lissa as the best unit because of her availability and her essentialness to the early game, but Libra is very close, and just like with Anna, they're both top tier units. For people who play the game differently than I do, I could see them putting more value on characters like Libra and Anna, who join your group with no investment, and they can provide S tier utility for the rest of the game. Now, technically speaking, Lissa also has access to Pegasus, and she can become a Dark Flyer and even a Galeforce user. However, I don't personally find this to be the best use of her talents in a no-grinding context. It's difficult to get her the amount of experience needed to make this build pay off before it would actually matter. Instead, I'd rather talk about what I consider to be her best training options and her best final builds. Of course, I am limiting this discussion to the no-grinding context, because that's what I focus most of my guides around, and most of my gameplay is done in this same way. However, if you are going to grind, it always opens up additional possibilities, like Galeforce Lissa. I just personally find that is less interesting to discuss, because with grinding, every character can become an unstoppable killing machine, and there's nothing left to talk about beyond the most basic idea that grinding makes you strong, which is just common sense. You don't need a YouTube video to tell you that grinding will make you strong. Anyway, as we've already discussed, Lissa starts in the Priest class and joins at the very start of the game. As a result, she will gain a lot of experience by healing your other allies, and will often be one of your first characters to reach level 10. In my case, it's pretty typical for her to reach level 10, 15, or even level 20 way before any of the other characters. There is a limited amount of second seals and master seals in the early game before chapter 12, and so you have a bit of a decision to make when it comes to using Lissa. You see, she's good with an early promotion, but she's also good with early second seal usage, and she's also good if you just leave her in Cleric and let her rise all the way to level 20 before promoting her later. And because all three options are good, we need to discuss all of them and find out what are the unique reasons why you'd want to use one specific build order for Lissa over another in a given playthrough. So, first of all, one of Lissa's unique strengths is that even as a base class cleric, she can continue to contribute to battles and do serious work without ever promoting. This gives her a powerful niche that most characters do not have. Remember, our number of Master Seals is very limited. You can sometimes get extras from Anna's shop, but that's not always a guarantee, and in the worst case scenario, you're only going to be able to early promote 2 units before you get to Chapter 12. Vaike is an example of a character who needs to promote as soon as possible in order to be very good. Otherwise, his combat as a fighter is going to be too weak, and he's not going to be able to keep up with enemies going into Chapters 8, 9, 10, and beyond. This means if you want to use Vaike, you have to commit a Master Seal to him, but Lissa is different. If you keep her in the Cleric class all the way through Chapter 12, she can still contribute in her primary role as a heal, physic, and rescue staff user, all the way up to Chapter 12. And she could still play a major role in helping you clear that chapter. And then, after you beat Chapter 12, you can buy a Master Seal and give it to her. I'm not sure if I'm getting my point across exactly the way I want to, but what I'm trying to say is that Lissa's presence on the team helps you with your resource management and team building. You can always fit Lissa onto your team without spending any additional resources. Just like she doesn't take away experience from other characters, she also doesn't take away any Master Seals or Second Seals from any other characters. If you have committed a Master Seal to Vaike and a Master Seal to Robin, that's fine. You can still use Lissa. She is still going to be almost exactly as good as she would have been with or without the Master Seal. This trait alone is so valuable, and it helps immensely in a no-grinding playthrough, and is one of the many reasons why I consider her to be such a top-tier unit. Not only is Lissa's presence in the early game nearly essential, but in that section of the game with the tightest resource management, as you're trying to get past Chapter 12 with a very small number of promoted units, so that you can access the shop that is going to allow you to promote even more of your units, there is no downside to using Lissa. She helps you get through those chapters, even unpromoted. She is still one of your best utility characters. Frederick is starting to fall off. Your best combat units are starting to require big investments and dedicated resources to be able to contribute. And yet, the whole time, Lissa is just there, continuing to do what she's always done, and still being great at it. If you don't have any other characters who require a second seal for their build, it can be a pretty good idea to send Lissa over to Troubadour while she's leveling up. Troubadour is almost the exact same class as Cleric, but it will allow her to promote directly into Valkyrie later on. And more importantly, it allows Lissa to usually gain a few extra levels worth of stats in the early game if she didn't otherwise have a Master Seal available. Depending on how the exact math works out, she might get like 30 levels of stats before promoting instead of only 20 levels worth of stats. This decision is not a no-brainer because there are merits to both paths, even putting aside the fact that someone else might want the second seal. Keeping Lissa in Cleric is going to allow her to promote directly into Sage, and getting access to Rally Magic and Tome Fair are both good. This line is going to be important if you want to make Lissa into an offensive character as soon as you possibly can. Troubadour and Valkyrie are a little bit faster than Cleric and Sage, so that is a consideration, but the path is more roundabout to get there, and the differences are fairly minor. Lissa isn't really a super fast character anyway, although with that in mind, you could make the argument that every point of speed matters, and therefore Valkyrie is probably better. But the more important thing is that training through Troubadour is going to allow her to pick up Resistance +2 and Demoiselle, and promoting into Valkyrie is going to let her get Rally Resistance and Dual Support Plus, which are both amazing skills. Rally Res is one of the better rally skills in the game, because you can get it from an already strong class in Valkyrie, and Resistance is a stat that your primary combat characters typically want to get a little bit extra in very specific situations where they need to fight a dangerous mage or a group of mixed attackers. The average class has 7 defense at base, but their average resistance is only about 3. And the average resistance growth rate in the game is only 22, but the average defense growth rate is 33. So looking at these numbers in general, your characters tend to have more defense than resistance in this game, but magical attackers tend to have just as much attack as physical enemies. Being able to give out +4 resistance on demand is quite valuable. And Dual Support Plus is a fantastic aura skill. Now, in Awakening, most aura skills have a range of 3 tiles, which is incredible. And it would be incredible here. But Dual Support Plus is so good that even though it has a below average range of only 1 tile, it is still arguably one of the best auras in the game, if not the best. It's very common in the Awakening skill list to have skills that give something like +10 avoid, +10 hit, or +5 crit. Well, the situation varies depending on the exact positioning, but Dual Support Plus gives around 5 to 10 extra points in hit, avoid, crit, and crit avoid. This bonus applies to Lissa and her para partner and anyone that is standing adjacent to Lissa. Essentially, with a single skill slot, by just equipping Dual Support Plus and no other skills, Lissa is gaining the value of 4 passive combat skills and giving it to multiple other characters just by standing on the battlefield. It doesn't even require her action to do this. Crit Avoid is probably the standout feature here because it's typical for enemies in this game to have a small crit chance, but reducing that chance by 10 points is often enough to bring it down to 0. I often say that Robin's Solidarity is one of the best auras in the game because it allows Robin to remove the crit chance against his or her allies by just standing next to them. Well, Dual Support Plus does the same thing, but it also applies to the person using the aura. Robin doesn't get the benefit of Solidarity. They can only give it to other people. But Lissa can get the benefit of Dual Support Plus herself. And then on top of that, she gives 3 additional combat bonuses and gives it to other characters. It's a bit crazy when you think about how much value this skill provides compared to almost any other single skill in the game. I mean, Evade +10 from the Myrmidon line only gives 10 avoid to Lonq, but Lissa can use Dual Support Plus to give the same amount of avoid to herself, and a second character, and a third, and a fourth, and 3 other stats. If you think that Lissa is going to reach level 20 in Cleric before you can get a Master Seal for her, in my opinion, it is always worth going into Troubadour at level 10, so that you can get as many levels worth of extra stats before promoting, and even if you're comparing the merits of Sage against Valkyrie, it's often a good idea to go into Troubadour just to get into Valkyrie anyway, because Valkyrie is so good. Lissa is a really unique character because unlike most second seal users, this build doesn't require her to start over with E rank and weapons in a weak base class and fight her way back through to level 10. Here, even when you reset her to a level 1 Troubadour, she's going to continue training by using her staff experience. And again, as we've been saying throughout this whole video, she never stops providing heal, physic, and rescue staff utility. She never needs to fight dangerous enemies. She never leeches experience from other characters. She's gaining levels, stats, and skills along the way. Even after she promotes into Sage or Valkyrie, she will be good enough to fight if she needs to. And her combat is usually good enough that you can use her as a player phase removal tool. But the reality is that she can still continue to generate free experience for herself, promoted class tier experience, just by continuing to use staffs. And she's not just burning through staff charges for the sake of grinding experience either. You can have her take meaningful actions, use her rescue staff, heal, and physics staff in a way that benefits the rest of the army, while always being rewarded for this. and never running into any kind of experience penalty. Now, having sung the praises of Valkyrie enough, we do need to talk about Dark Flyer. I think Pegasus Knight especially is a bit of a noob trap for Lissa. I'm sure some people have fond memories of making her into a Pegasus, using exponential growth to level her up, promote her into a Dark Flyer, get Galeforce, and have lots of fun flying circles around enemies and killing things. The truth is that if you pick up and play this game today, and you put aside your memories of your first playthrough from 10 years ago, of playthroughs on lower difficulty modes, if you want to play this game on Lunatic or Lunatic Plus, and you're not allowing yourself to grind, the Pegasus leveling path is going to be extremely difficult for Lissa, and it's not even worth the effort. You're giving up all of Lissa's best attributes, features, and qualities during a time when her contributions to the team are so crucial. You want to promote her into a Pegasus at level 10 to get Galeforce as soon as possible, but this transforms her from a top-tier utility unit into an unbelievably weak combat unit, stuck with E rank in lances. She will be virtually incapable of fighting anything, and now you've put her into a class where she needs to fight to gain experience. She can't use staff experience to level up anymore. This is a big problem on its own, and you've also got one fewer staff user to help out with healing and rescuing other units. Then, even if you manage to get her to level 10 by setting up cheesy kills, giving her extreme favoritism, and babying her all the way to promotion, she goes into Dark Flyer, which has some of the worst base combat of any tier 2 class in the game. And she does finally have access to tomes, but she starts with E rank. With only 10 levels worth of stats, she's going to have trouble keeping up. Lissa's offense is decent, but it's not that good. She is not going to shine in a weak combat class like Dark Flyer, and you're going to continue to struggle all the way to level 15 Dark Flyer. Then, finally, the moment arrives, and you finally got Galeforce, and it's on a unit who is better at dealing chip damage than securing kills. And when she is able to kill enemies, she's going to take so much counter damage in the process that she can't always make a good use of her second action. I mean, at least she can run away to safety and use hit and run tactics, and that's something. But the reality is there are just better Galeforce units in the game, and all of them are easier to train for Galeforce than Lissa is. I do consider her to be a top tier unit, but top tier doesn't always mean having to run a specific build. She is a top tier staff character. She doesn't need Galeforce to be good. There are characters who are better suited for the Galeforce role, and those characters can't do what Lissa can do in the staff role. The most important thing is understanding the unique identity and the unique strengths of each character, and making use of what they're good at, instead of trying to force everyone into the same role, even when they don't fit. Unlike a game such as Three Houses, for example, the unit identity in Awakening is pretty specific, and you have to stick Lissa with what she's good at if you want to see her shine in no-grind context. You can pass Galeforce down to Owain, but this is sacrificing Lissa's viability for the sake of a child unit who is probably going to have difficulty getting up to speed. Myrmidon isn't even a great class to start in for a character who wants to be a Galeforce user, and I've talked at length already about why Generation 2 units are difficult to use in a no-grinding playthrough. When Owain joins, he's going to be 15 levels below the enemy level curve. He's not going to be able to safely fight or damage most things, and this makes it extremely difficult for him to get experience. I will talk later about some of the ways that he can be made to work, but for now, let's stick to Lissa herself. If you do want to make Lissa into an offensive character, staying in Sage or even Valkyrie is usually totally fine. However, for the sake of giving the most complete information for the people who might want it, I will give you my opinion on the best possible way to run a Galeforce Lissa build if you're not allowing yourself to grind. First, you must commit an early Master Seal to her, not a second seal. At level 10, she can promote from Cleric directly into Sage. Now thankfully, because Sage keeps access to staves, she can continue to grind staff experience and level up surprisingly fast, while also gaining tome rank. Even if and when she gets ahead of the enemy level curve, she can continue to push all the way to level 15 Sage with minimal trouble, because you always gain the same amount of experience when using Mend, Physic, and Rescue staves, even if you're already overleveled. If you're going this route, make sure you have a second, third, or even fourth backup staff user in mind. Again, as soon as Lissa reaches level 15 in Sage, you want to switch her over to Dark Flyer. This might require using one of your early contested second seals before you get access to the second seal shop, so remember to keep that in mind when planning out your builds. But it will be worth it. At this point, Lissa will lose access to staves, and you need to have your other backup staff users ready to take over her role as the primary utility for the team. However, Lissa herself will have Tome Fair, which gives her an extra 5 damage when attacking, and is worth an extra 10 damage as long as she can double enemies. Additionally, because she leveled up so fast and so far ahead of the level curve by abusing the staff experience mechanic, she's going to have inflated magic and inflated speed compared to what she would normally have. She can actually fight the enemies that you need her to fight. Instead of having a weak level 1 Pegasus, Lissa with E-rank lances who can't deal any damage, you are training a level 1 Dark Flyer Lissa with a huge magic stat, Tome Fair, immediate access to tomes, already raised tome rank. This build can actually fight things. It can kill enemies. She can gain experience. The path to level 15 Dark Flyer is within your reach, and when you get Galeforce, you will have reasonably good combat, and Lissa will be a unit who can reliably kill enemies. Trigger Galeforce, and then, well, a lot of the times she still needs to run away to safety, but that's actually pretty good. The best part, however, is that you do not need to keep her in Dark Flyer. You can switch her back to the Valkyrie class. Now she has all of the offensive benefits of Tome Fair and Galeforce, but she regains access to staves, and the only thing she gives up is lances, which she doesn't want. Staff experience is going to help her keep up with the level curve, even if her combat starts to fall behind, and staff utility will allow her to be a major contributor on your team. Even better is that you can do a tactic where Lissa runs forward, kills an enemy, triggers Galeforce, and then runs back to the rest of your group and uses a staff. It's essentially the same as having Lissa use a staff every turn, but now she's also killing something every turn. This boost in action economy is actually worth all of the trouble, but at the end of the day, this is still a fairly difficult path. It requires a lot of favoritism toward Lissa, and I do think running this build is worth it, but I don't usually run it for my playthroughs, because in my opinion, a regular Valkyrie or Sage Lissa is already good enough. But there are other characters who require favoritism and extra training in order to be good, while Lissa can be good without all of this extra favoritism. It can sometimes be more difficult to build support ranks on your staff utility characters, and many times they need to be unpaired and taking actions on their own rather than pairing up with their partner, and they'll be away from the rest of your group. But I do want to detail what Lissa both gives to a partner and what she wants from her support partners, and some tips that can help you with raising her support rank more quickly, because it's not always the most intuitive thing if you don't understand how supports work in this game. So first, let's talk about that. How do you gain support points with a staff user? Okay, you see, when you use a staff on someone, you gain 2 out of 9 points that are needed to gain a full support point at the end of the map. If you don't gain enough, this value is going to round down to 0 at the end of the map, and you actually get nothing. There might be situations you've been in where you had Lissa heal a unit once or twice on every single map for many chapters in a row, and you've been confused as to why there don't seem to be gaining any support points. This is the reason why. But keep in mind that this value can also round up. So if she ends the chapter with 6 out of 9 points, this will round up and you'll get a full 9 points. And then she gets +1 support with that character. This is still a fairly slow rate of increase. You can actually get +3 support per chapter if you're able to get this value to round up to 27, which is 3 times 9. It requires 23 out of 27 points to round up to 27. But still, if you're aiming to have Lissa support with a specific ally, just make sure that they gain at least 6 points per chapter so that it doesn't round it down and they're always gaining at least 1 point together. That's the easiest thing to do without keeping track of all the math. Now, the good news is also that fighting together one time while paired up gives exactly 6 out of 9 points. So as long as you know this information, you can use this to your advantage. Just make sure that Lissa pairs up with her partner and they fight together at least once per chapter, and you'll always be making at least some progress towards your next support benchmark. By the way, 14 points are needed to round up to that +2 support point, if you're curious. This can be accomplished by fighting together twice, and then using the staff on that character once. You'll also get the same 2 out of 9 if you stand next to each other and fight while unpaired, but I'm not going to delve too deep into the support mechanics for this video, because I know some people are going to find it overwhelming, and I've probably already lost a few of you. Even I found it overwhelming for the longest time, because it requires an understanding and application of fractions and rounding and keeping track of information that's not visible to the player until after the numbers have been rounded. And yeah, the whole thing is a mess. Let's talk about her potential partners, a subject that most people are going to find more interesting and easier to digest. Lissa and Robin is a very strong pairing, which makes use of some of the strongest traits of male Robin, as well as some of Lissa's better traits as a support partner. Both of them join early on, which will allow you to start building this S support quickly. And even better, it gives access to 2 Paralogue chapters instead of just 1. You will unlock Owain and Morgan as soon as you possibly can, allowing you to recruit and train those characters as early as you desire before they fall too far behind the level curve of the game, and even allowing you to use those chapters to potentially train other units with extra combat, extra enemies, and extra experience before going into more difficult main story chapters. This is a fantastic way to make use of second generation characters, which can sometimes otherwise be a bit clunky. Robin can pass Soul directly to Owain, and Owain starts with Vantage already. This means that he has the skeleton of a Vantage Soul build from the moment he joins. Starting in Myrmidon still isn't fantastic, but he'll have the option to switch to Cleric, to train him using a staff, not needing to fight enemies 15 levels above himself, and then promote directly into Sage. Or you could even send him over to Dark Mage and begin training a frankly unkillable sorcerer with Vantage, Soul, and he could also just use Nosferatu on an as-needed basis to guarantee survival during difficult enemy phase sweeps. Now, one of Morgan's greatest strengths is their ability to start in almost any class of your choice. Because Morgan goes with the class of their mother or father, you can have her start as a cleric by using Lissa as Robin's partner. We've already talked about how and why staff-using characters don't care as much about the level curve, and so being an under-leveled second-generation unit in a base class becomes less of a problem for Morgan. She can very quickly become a top-tier utility character, inheriting powerful rally and aura skills from her mother, learning them herself from all of the class lines she has access to, and there's also no reason why you can't just make her into a second Robin as a combat unit or whatever you want to do with Robin, because she can do anything. I don't think Lissa is the best mother for Morgan, but I think she's likely near the top. And the combined value of getting Morgan and Owain both early, Lissa being a top tier mother, and Robin being a top tier father for Owain, all these qualities really add up together and make this pairing very great. And the two also do a wonderful job of supporting each other along the way and into the late game. Robin's extremely wide class set allows him to switch to any class that Lissa wants or needs to get the support bonuses that she needs. And Lissa's access to some of the best aura skills in the game stacks very well with Robin's already solid combat if you want to make them into a primary combat unit. You're going to have Lissa and Robin fighting together for most of the early game anyway. If you were planning on benching Lissa and have Robin solo the rest of the game, why not just have them pair up together and have Robin benefit from dual support plus and Demoiselle instead? To me, this makes more sense, but I'm also not a huge fan of the Juggernaut meta anyway, so what do I know? Maybe the people who play the game that way more often will have a different opinion. In a team-building environment, the way that I play the game, I think this pairing is great. Frederick and Lissa isn't quite as good, but they are relatively solid, especially in terms of resource management. They get a lot of the same benefits of Lissa and Robin as a pair, if you're not considering the second generation. If you need to sustain Frederick's combat as you go into the late game, Valkyrie is a great pair-up class, and those support auras really help a lot. But realistically, the other direction is where this pair shines a bit more. Lissa really appreciates the extra defense and bulk she gets from Frederick. If Lissa is otherwise standing in the back line using stabs and not doing much else, Frederick's combat has already fallen off, and the only thing he can really do is be a pair-up unit. It's not a terrible use of a deployment slot in order to just send Frederick into battle and have him pair up with Lissa, so that if an enemy does reach your back line, she is more likely to survive combat against one enemy or even two. I don't think Frederick is a particularly good father for Owain, but there are some arguably decent skills you could pass down, and it does give Owain access to 3 full class sets that he otherwise does not have. I think if you're playing on Lunatic mode or lower, and your goal is to just do something a little bit different with Owain, this pairing does open up some possibilities. But if you're sticking with Lunatic Plus, or even Lunatic, and you're not allowing yourself to grind, I doubt you could make very good use out of Owain with Frederick as a father. With the higher level of difficulty and stronger enemies, you really are going to need units with more optimized builds. On the subject of more optimized builds, let's talk about the Virion pairing, and one interesting thing that he can do as a father. In the previous Lonq build guide video, I talked about lock touch fathers and how you can sacrifice the viability of a Generation 1 father in order to make their child either stronger or have better utility, since you know you're going to bench the father anyway. Virion is a pretty good example of this. He has access to both Wyvern Rider and Mage, which is a key trait. They both have skills that give stat bonuses and are quite impactful and a little bit underrated in a no-grinding team-building meta. So here's how it works. Let's say you wanted to run a magical version of Owain. You can have Lissa and Virion get their S-rank support early on and gain access to Owain's Paralog. For Lissa, you can use her as normal. Virion, on the other hand, the only thing you need to do is make sure that he reaches level 10 in Archer and gets an S support with Lissa. There is no other requirement. At the exact moment when you're about to go into Owain's chapter and you're about to recruit him, you're going to do something. Switch Virion's class over to Mage using a second seal. This causes him to instantly learn Magic plus 2 and move it to the bottom of his skill list. Now, as a level 1 Mage, Virion is going to absolutely suck. He's not going to be able to do anything or train back up for the rest of the playthrough, probably. I guess he could arguably make a decent pair-up bot for his wife, Lissa, so that's nice, I suppose. But the really important thing, the reason why we're doing this, is because he can immediately pass down Magic plus 2 to Owain. This allows Owain to get the skill without needing to train through the Mage class line. The only other way he could get it is by switching to level 1 Mage and training all the way back up to level 10 himself. Essentially, you're saving 10 levels worth of training by just passing down with Virion. From here, you could have Owain change into a Cleric and use staff experience to reach level 10 quickly, and then promote directly into Sage. Now you have Sage Owain with Magic +2 without needing any of the trouble that would have come with training as a level 1 base class mage. If you want to run a physical build, you can do the same thing with Wyvern Rider. Switching Virion over to Wyvern Rider gives him Strength +2, and then he can immediately pass this down to Owain. Virion has decent stat mods, and so unlike Frederick, he's not going to lower Owain's speed modifier, and it does allow him to run either a physical or magical build as you prefer. Now, you're probably wondering if these Magic +2 or Strength +2 skills are actually worth it. Well, honestly, in a no-grinding context, many characters won't even get 5 skills, much less 5 useful skills before the end of the game. Magic +2 is like having an extra tonic that you get for free in every chapter, but then you could also still use a tonic on top of this to boost your magic stat even further. In the past, I think these skills were pretty overlooked and fairly underrated. People didn't quite understand how good they actually were, but funny enough, the exploration of the meta in the Fire Emblem Fates games, I think, changed the opinions on these skills, even in Awakening, retroactively. You see, in Fates, that game is all about damage stacking. There aren't as many hit, avoid, and crit skills in Fates. Instead, there are a lot more skills that give a small bonus, like +2 damage, +3 damage, and many of these skills are considered quite strong and they're worth getting. Now, let's think about that for a second. What is Strength +2? What is Magic +2? It's literally just a +2 damage skill that's always active. So when you think about it that way, it becomes easy to understand that just like in Fates, these are damage stacking skills, and they're quite good. Especially if you didn't have anything else that was going into that 4th or 5th damage slot anyway. Adding Magic +2 on top of Tome Fair will give Owain 7 extra damage. As for Lissa, getting a defense bonus from Archer is nice, and Bow Knight is actually a great support class. And Virion actually even has Dark Knight, which is one of the best classes that Lissa wants from a support partner. So while this isn't the best couple in the game by any stretch, you can certainly make good use out of them. At the very least, if he's standing in the back paired up with Lissa, he gives the same advantage of Frederick as helping Lissa stay alive whenever enemies reach the back line. The major difference that puts Virion ahead of Frederick is that he has better class access for supporting Lissa specifically. He can actually be a very good father for Owain, and if the situation calls for it, you can still rotate this guy back into the lead and have him shoot at an enemy flyer for 3 times effective damage with his bow. Honestly, worth a deployment slot. Stall is just a worse version of Frederick in many ways, and this is one of them. He gives a slightly better stat mod to Owain, while still not being a great father for him, but that's about it. In almost all other ways, he is virtually the same pair-up partner as Frederick, but worse for Lissa. He does make a stronger Bow Knight than Virion specifically, so if you're looking to run that build, it might be worth considering. But I would rather save that conversation for a stall video because it doesn't really have very much to do with Lissa. Sadly, for Lissa, Stall is among her worst partners. The best thing he could pass down might be Bowfair, but again, Virion exists, he gets it faster, and he's one of the better options for Lissa. Now, Vaike is a character who greatly appreciates the support of Valkyrie Lissa if you're attempting to use him as a main combat carry for the game. The benefits of her defensive auras give him a lot more breathing room when doing more risky enemy phase sweeps, and the extra points of resistance that he gets from Valkyrie pair-up are much appreciated. It's just so much more likely for Vaike to survive long enough to activate Soul when he has a Lissa pair-up. It really makes a difference, especially on Lunatic Plus and even Lunatic. Additionally, because these two have a uniquely fast support, you can get the benefits of this support quickly and get access to Owain quickly as well, and they both join early on. These are many of the same benefits we discussed between Robin and Lissa as a pairing. Additionally, Vaike is arguably the best father for a physical Owain build. Like Robin, Vaike can pass down soul to his son, which allows him to move into more productive class lines early on without necessarily needing to go into hero at any point, although hero is one of the best physical classes, but whatever. Vaike does have other options that he can pass down as well. HP plus 5 and Zeal are both worth inheriting, and Vaike will always have both of them. Switching him over to Lock Touch and passing that down is still an option, and if you're planning on benching Vaike, and it can be decent if you want a good combat unit like Owain to be able to open chests without needing to deploy an extra thief on specific maps. But overall, most importantly, with this father, you just end up with an Owain that actually has decent mods for a physical build, which can otherwise be tricky to find from other characters. The one criticism I will give for this Owain build is that I will say you mostly end up getting a second copy of Vaike, who might even be worse, and requires a second training arc after Vaike has already been trained. But still, not every moment that we play Fire Emblem needs to be dedicated toward running the best possible build in every deployment slot and never deviating from that meta while playing the game the same way over and over and over. If your goal is to use Owain, and you want him to be a physical build, I think running Vaike as the father is probably going to be your best choice. Just as Stahl is a worse version of Frederick, Callum is just a worse version of Vaike. He gives worse mods to Owain, he gives fewer useful classes and skills, and his only real benefit to Owain in particular is probably something like Defense plus 2 or Lock Touch, options that you can already get from other better characters. There are children that would appreciate Callum's parentage and inheritance, but Owain is not one of them. And Lissa doesn't particularly get much from Callum that she wouldn't get from Frederick or Virion. He's just another character who can hang out as a backpack and gives her additional bulk on the back line, but he's not even one of the great choices for that role. Lonq, on the other hand, is great, and he's an interesting case. He actually has a lot of similarities to Vaike when it comes to the Lissa pair-up. He doesn't try to do the exact same things that Vaike tries to do, but he does benefit from the same bonuses that Lissa gives. She can use Dual Support Plus and her S rank support bonus to increase his crit rate and his dodge chance, which are things that Lonq wants to maximize. His resistance is naturally a little bit low, so having extra resistance from a Valkyrie wife is also good. Additionally, if you want to keep Lissa in the lead, she, like any character, will appreciate the massive amount of speed she gets from Lonq, and he can make Killing Edge or Killer Bow dual strikes from the Assassin class line. So the problem, I think, is that Lonq gets all of the same benefits from Miriel, and he appreciates Miriel more than Lissa. While Lissa gets many or all of the same benefits from Vaike or Virion, and probably appreciates them just as much or more than Lonq. You can certainly run this build. Lissa and Lonq is good. It's probably B tier or even A tier, but it is worth considering that both Lonq and Lissa have better options, so it's tough to pair them together. And unfortunately, there's a bit of an opportunity cost here when it comes to Owain. You see, Vantage is a fantastic skill to inherit, but because Owain already starts as a level 10 Myrmidon, he already has this skill. What this means is that if Lonq is Owain's father, he's not passing down Vantage to a different child unit who would have appreciated getting Vantage a lot more. Severa, Morgan, Inigo, plenty of others. Now, there are some upsides to this pairing when it comes to Owain. Lonq is pretty agnostic when it comes to magic versus strength, but the main thing he specializes in is speed, which is the most important stat in the game. So if you want to run a Sage Owain build, Lonq as a father will help him keep up with the speed of the enemies in the higher difficulty modes. So it's a bit of a tricky conundrum, where Lonq is a very good father for Owain, and he is a good husband for Lissa, but they aren't the best husband or wife for each other, and Lonq is a top-tier father for so many other characters. It makes the choice of assigning him to Owain very difficult, unless your intention is to show Owain some clear favoritism. Ricken is a solid choice for Owain's father if you want to pass down the highest possible magic modifier, and this can be bolstered even further by inheriting Magic 2, which, unlike Virion, Ricken can actually pass down without using a second seal and without hurting his own viability. It even gives Owain access to the Dark Knight class that he wouldn't otherwise have, and this can allow him to be a decent supporter for a magical partner while keeping tome and sword access. If you have a specific Generation 2 unit in mind that you want Owain to support, this can be good, and you can combine it with the ability to inherit Dual Support Plus from his mother. You can start to visualize a really solid Owain supporting dual striking build. And if you just want to make him into a hard-hitting magical nuke, Ricken is still a very good father. However, this is an even better opportunity to talk about Ricken and the value that he provides to Lissa. As a primary staff-using character who sometimes engages in combat, Lissa greatly appreciates a partner like Ricken that can boost her magic score very high when she needs. In this game, the range of your physic and rescue staff is not fixed. In Fates, the range staffs were all changed to be exactly 10 range. But in Awakening, this was not the case. The range was adjusted based on the magic stat of the user, and the bonus you get from your parent partner does contribute to increasing your range. This means that Ricken can give Lissa an extra few tiles, sometimes as much as 5 extra tiles of range with her rescue and physics staffs, and this honestly makes quite a big difference in certain maps. Being able to reach allies from further away without needing to expose Lissa to danger is a solid contribution, and is absolutely worth a deployment slot. Additionally, both Lissa and Ricken could split up and use rescue staffs separately, so you have 2 rescue staff uses per turn, and they can also attack enemies with regular tomes, or especially wind tomes for effective damage. And since they're both magical units, they both do a good job of pushing each other's magical stat to reach damage benchmarks, so that they can one-shot enemy flyers. This is a pair that I find really good, but strangely, I almost never find myself using for whatever reason. There's probably a little bit of difficulty with fitting Ricken into an already full team, but if you're playing with relatively low deployments, I could see this duo being pretty optimized and a good way to make strong use of 2 specific units. Gaius, unfortunately, as a partner and as a father, has many things in common with Vaike and Lonq, but he is a strictly worse partner for Lissa in every way compared to those two, so it's not even really worth discussing. I will mention that, again, there's an opportunity cost here. Because Gaius can pass Galeforce access to his daughter, giving him a son instead with Owain is really wasting his potential as a Galeforce dad, although honestly, Galeforce dads are not a super relevant concept to discuss in no grinding. You just rarely ever have the time, levels, or experience needed to raise up those characters to level 15 in Darkflyer anyway. Everything that I just said about Gaius, and I mean literally every single thing that I just said, applies to Donnel as well. The only difference is that by starting in Villager, Donnel is even more crappy, he's even more difficult to train, he's even more difficult to gain supports with, and he contributes almost nothing to the team while you're trying to get him to pair up with Lissa. Avoid this pairing at all costs. Gregor is another worse Vaike, worse Virion situation, so we're going to mostly skip over him. Also, the worst thing is that due to class overlap, he actually only gives one class to Owain. So yeah, this might actually be Lissa's worst option for a husband. I will say that if you're using Gregor as your primary combat carry, favoring his late join time and the fact that he comes ready to promote into hero, unlike Vaike who needs to be trained into hero, Gregor does benefit from all of the same things as Vaike. He certainly would enjoy the value of Demoiselle and Dual Support Plus and the resistance stat that he gets from Valkyrie to make his soul tanking more consistent. So there is some kind of niche here, but it's pretty narrow, and if you are going that route and placing value on characters who require low investment, low seals, low experience, I would say that Gregor with Maribelle, Miriel, and Saria are all better options for Gregor. Finally, we get to talk about Libra and Henry. I'll frame this discussion in the context of Owain first, because I think they're both very similar fathers in this way. They both give one less point of magic compared to Ricken, which is not that significant in the grand scheme of things. Libra can pass down magic +2 if you want to have him do it, but Henry cannot, so that's worth considering. They both give the exact same speed mod, so in general, these two are very similar as fathers. The most important quality that they share is access to Dark Mage. Because Owain starts as a Myrmidon with Vantage, he is the poster child for this type of build. The ability to send him over to Dark Mage level 1 and then train him as a Nosferatu tank with Vantage is always going to be quite strong. Libra will be the better father if you want Owain to have better resistance, and like I said, he can pass down magic +2 if you want or need him to. But otherwise, there's very little difference between these two, and that's actually a great thing. It's the opposite of the Lonq opportunity cost puzzle that we needed to solve earlier. In this case, if you need someone to have Henry as their father, you can use Libra for Owain. And if you need someone to have Libra as their father, you can use Henry for Owain. Everything just kind of works itself out. If you don't understand why this build is so good, imagine the following. Owain has +10 hit, +10 avoid, +10 crit, and +10 crit avoid from his mother by inheriting Dual Support Plus. He has an additional +10 evade from starting in the Myrmidon line. He's getting effectively 25 extra hit and 10 extra crit from Hex and Anathema because you just trained him through the Dark Mage line. His speed and luck are both good, making it even less likely that enemies are going to hit him. If enemies do hit him, he's going to hit them back with Nosferatu, healing himself in the process. If his health ever gets below half, the Vantage skill that he got from Myrmidon will activate. He will attack enemies before they attack him, allowing him to heal before he gets attacked so that he never dies. It makes him virtually unkillable. And because his speed mod is at least decent, things are never going to double him, usually. And with the accuracy bonuses from all of the skills and the support bonuses, you don't need to worry about him missing with Nosferatu, so there's no risk of him failing to heal himself, and he's going to crit very often, allowing him to one-shot enemies to heal for even more and avoid taking counter damage. If you want to make Owain good, I personally believe either Henry, Libra, or using Robin to do something similar is the way to go. This is peak Owain gaming. At the end of the day, Lissa herself is a top-tier unit who provides incredible amounts of utility in every single chapter of the game and never falls off. Indeed, she only gets better and better as you get further into the game. In my opinion, this combination of qualities that we have discussed makes her the best character in Fire Emblem Awakening. If I was going to make a tier list today, for no grind, viability, I would put her at the top of the S tier. Even if you have zero plans to ever use Owain, or you're getting much less value out of him, it ultimately does not matter, because Lissa herself is already one of the most impactful and useful characters that you can use in order to make your playthroughs more consistent and less difficult. Now, looking at Henry and Libra as potential support partners for Lissa, they both do a good job of boosting her magic stat to increase the range of her utility stabs. Libra is able to function as an additional staff user, while Henry has a more difficult time doing that. But Henry does come with better support auras by default, Henry is also a little bit better at supporting other characters aside from Lissa, so while he does support Lissa very well, you could also instead use him as a partner for many other characters and make very good use out of him. I think Henry is one of the better S-rank support partners in the game in terms of how much he supports his partner and how much he gives to them, and also passing down good class access to his children. So the decision to use him as a father for Owain or a husband for Lissa will make Owain into an S-tier character, but it also means that you're taking away the potential of Henry as an S-tier father for someone else or an S-tier husband for someone else. So keep that in mind. I am planning to make a video about Henry in the future, so we'll talk more about that in the future. If you'd like to see that video, more guides like this, other videos about Fire Emblem's hardest difficulty mode, Lunatic Plus, or even videos about other random games and anime, I highly recommend you subscribe to the channel. Oh, and leave a like or a comment if you enjoyed this. It honestly really does help immensely. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day.